Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Genie Vlogger live stream. Today, we're going to be talking about DNA tests. I figured we'd go over a lot of the different news stuff that's coming out, go through some of the blogs and news articles that the companies themselves are releasing on what they're announcing that's coming out or what has recently come out. And then I figured I'd also take questions and do all of that typical fun stuff as usual. So I guess before we jump into doing all of the hellos and all of that, I just start by giving a rundown that same thing as usual for my question streams, where if you ask questions in the chat, I will try to answer them, but I can't guarantee I will answer them. But if you do one of the super stickers or super chats or whatever it's called on YouTube, and you ask a question that way, I guarantee I will answer one of those questions. Let me get my virtual background looking a little nicer. Maybe. Let's see. I think that's probably pretty good. That's as good as we'll get it for now. So, but let's go through and say the hellos. And I should mention, I see we have a few people on Twitch. I guess really one or two, but I'm running a poll on YouTube right now, just through the chat on the live stream. Which DNA test do you like best? It only allows me to put 4 in, so I didn't include living DNA, but definitely check that out. Yeah, super chat is what most people call them. I always forget which one it is. I know there's super stickers and then there's super chats and then there's other stuff in Twitch and all of that, but I don't have it where I can get money in Twitch, so Twitch doesn't matter anyway. But okay, so starting out, how we got here, Genealogy, Brian Nash. Good day, eh? Good day, Brian. Thanks for joining, as always. Another Brian. We have Brian Lewis. Hello. Thank you for joining. Stig coming in from Oslo, Norway. Hello, Stig. Thank you for joining in as usual. Bryce Gardner. Hello, Bryce. Thank you for joining. We have Drea. You made it. Hello, Drea. Sharon Phillips coming in from New York. Julia Joyce from North Baddesley, England. Hello, Julia. John Tyner. I've taken all of these tests, including living DNA. I think that's the interesting one. I haven't tested through living DNA, but I've obviously uploaded there. So I'll talk a little bit about my history with DNA testing, all that in this too. Brian said he didn't do 23andMe. We have Blackberry Rose coming in from California, one of our wonderful admins. Thank you for joining. Ashley Mufasa. I've taken Ancestry and living DNA since I have mostly British ancestry. It definitely makes a lot of sense with living DNA and having British ancestry. I'm curious, how well did living DNA's breakdown match up to what you know about your family? Because I've actually heard a lot of good things from people where it matches up quite well to where they know their family lived in England and all that. And hello from Florida. Hello, Ashley. Mattias Johnson. Hello, sweet here. 3 of the 4 done, not 23andMe. Honestly, if you want to get the widest range, doing 23andMe is a great option to get more testers, because there are a lot of people in 23andMe who have not tested or uploaded anywhere else. But it's definitely the company that I kind of recommend the least these days. So we'll kind of talk about that throughout the stream, I think. Eric Sheridan, hello from Kansas City, Missouri. Hello, Eric. Thanks for joining. Drea, taken Ancestry and 23andMe and have uploaded to the other two. Been debating taking them direct from the source just to see if anything new comes up. And it's possible there's new stuff that may come up because with each DNA test, they are testing largely the same amount of DNA spots, the SNPs. I'm going to try not to be too jargony, but the DNA markers, they're testing about 700,000 or so of these DNA markers at each company. And while each company is largely testing the same amount or the same DNA markers, each company is also testing DNA markers that they only test. And there are some companies that, maybe 2 of them test for these markers, maybe 3 of them, maybe it's just 1. But that is one benefit of if you really want to get the most out of a specific DNA website, to then test directly through them, because that means that when you're matching the other testers who've tested at that site, that will then give you the best breakdown because you're testing against all of their DNA markers. So GEDmatch even realized this, because in GEDmatch, you're comparing all sorts of DNA kits from all sorts of different websites. So they created what's known as the Super Kit, which is a tool where you can take multiple DNA tests you've taken at different websites, and then it will merge it into this super kit. So each unique DNA marker that only one of the sites tested, well, now they're all put together into one profile. So when you match against anyone from any of the websites, you're matching against all of the DNA that they've had tested, as opposed to only matching against the parts of the DNA that both websites tested. So, yeah. William Peter, hello, buddy, from Long Island. Glad to actually catch your stream live. Well, hello, William. Thank you for joining. Glad you're able to catch it live from Long Island. We have Shelly Monson. Hi, John. Hi. I don't know if you're asking me. You're hi, John Tyner. Okay, hi. I was like, I'm not John. All right. Matthias Johnson, I like that you can take Ancestry and move to FTD and MyHeritage. I, however, like MyHeritage tools far better than the others. And that's a big thing I think I'm going to talk about on this stream, and something that if you watch my most recent best DNA test to take video, that was my conclusion, was MyHeritage. Ancestry is definitely doing some stuff that we'll talk about that is kind of they're starting to take the lead. Brian Alam, hello. Hi, Brian. Thank you for joining. John, no, have not taken the living DNA test. Okay. Blackberry Rose, surprise, 0 of 21 have voted for 23andMe. I'm honestly not surprised. I feel like after the past 5-6 years or so, 23andMe really dropped off for the genealogy community. I am a little surprised at how high Ancestry is, but I guess not completely. I guess I thought it might be, it might be, a little closer in the 50s and whatnot, but yeah, it's interesting. Sharp Lisa, hello from Southern Ontario, Canada. Hello. Ashley, I've done a lot of research and it matches up very well with the regional breakdown. Okay, very interesting. So for those who missed it, Ashley mentioned before she had taken living DNA and another one, I forgot which one exactly, because she had British ancestry. And I asked if it matched quite well to what she'd found in her tree. And so this is the answer. So that's really good to hear, because that's what I've heard from a lot of people. And the other thing with living DNA, it's also very well known for having the most nuanced African DNA breakdown, which that one, I don't know if I've seen a whole lot of results. I can't remember if Jabari Walker tested through them when he did the DNA testing for Matt Baker and I when we did our little collab there, which if you all didn't check that out, definitely check that out, where Matt Baker, Jabari Walker, and I did a collab together where Matt Baker did a bunch of DNA testing with Jabari, where Matt Baker from Useful Charts, that is, and then he did a comparison of the DNA tests for Jabari to discuss what's the best one for people with African American ancestry. And then I built the family tree for Jabari and did a YouTuber family tree series episode. I will be doing more episodes on his family eventually. There was a genealogist that I was actually working with who runs a podcast that did some great research into the family and uncovered some really interesting stuff. And that'll be an episode eventually. It's just it's so hard to do the YouTuber family tree episodes, and I've got a lot of stuff coming out with the Max Muller stuff too. So, but just a lot of interesting stuff to mention. So check those videos out from that collab. All right, Shelly Munson. I've done Ancestry, 23andMe, Living DNA, and FTDNA. Hi from Nevada. Hello. So yeah, so the only one you haven't done is MyHeritage, although you can obviously upload with them. And then Julia, 23andMe has helped me. I found a link to a great-great-great-grandparents, same male DNA as my cousin, but different surname. I think my ancestor was actually Klein, as EV13 is very common for this name. Interesting. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. 23andMe certainly is helpful. And there's a lot of great stuff to the website. It's just that with the 23andMe Plus that they rolled out, I forgot how many years ago now, and then just kind of not taking away stuff from genealogists, it just really just put a big sour note in everyone's mouth. And then they just kind of really made it publicly known that their focus was not going to be on the genealogy anymore. In fact, I remember there was a blog article from Roberta Estes of DNA Explained, where she basically was just like, I don't remember if she called it like breaking up with 23andMe. But I wonder if I can find that. I'm gonna see if I can do. But basically, it was just kind of like a article saying, like, they're doing everything that is just not making it worthwhile as a genealogist to do it. I'm trying to find it. She still is talking a lot about 23andMe. I mean, 23andMe is certainly the most, or it certainly is very useful, especially because it has such a large database of people who are only in that site. And a large reason for that has to do with the fact that 23andMe was one of those tests that a ton of people took just for the admixtures. And because of that, it was also a test that a lot of people bought for people to gift. Similar to Ancestry DNA. Let's see. Still going through. I wonder if she took it down. I doubt it. But yeah, 23andMe is definitely one of those tests that used to be suggested a lot more than it is nowadays, but still useful. Charlie, evening. Good to have you in the chat. Always wonderful to have another one of our admin mods. Yes, it's Yakin Seahorse. Eric, I've only taken Ancestry and FTDNA. The Big Y is so valuable when looking for unknown paternal lines. Yeah, and honestly, the Big Y is extremely important if you really want to get super in-depth into your paternal line. And for some people, if you come from a Y line that has a lot of DNA testers, you can figure out a whole lot of stuff that even if you can't necessarily link it up genealogically, it's still things that you can be very confident about happening. So not to give too much away, but it's not going to be this first episode, but there will be an episode on Max Muller where I had him do Big Y DNA testing. And Michael Waz, a good friend of mine and a specialist in Y DNA testing, collaborated with me in analyzing Max's Y DNA. And it allowed us to figure out some really, really interesting stuff, including some stuff that we're pretty confident about that, is in the 1200s and earlier. So it really is, Big Y is quite amazing. And super useful to do any sort of Y DNA testing, even if you don't have the money necessarily for Big Y. just because there's a lot that you can learn from it in terms of your matches and all that. And especially if you have a major question mark on your purely paternal line. Super kits. Let's talk about pro and cons on allowing to upload a super kit to say my heritage. I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if you can download a super kit to then upload it elsewhere. I've never heard of anyone trying that. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I've ever tried to download any DNA kits off of GEDmatch. So I guess that's the big question, if you could even do that. But I don't think you can. But if you could, I mean, probably not. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's going to make that huge of a difference necessarily. But I guess it could. I'm not sure. I'll keep an eye out in chat to see if anyone else has something to say about that. Julia, I couldn't find grandfather in the name of St. Clair. Ethnicity matches myself, and it looks like I do have Jewish heritage. Interesting. Yeah, with Jewish heritage in England, depending on how far back it is, that might be able to help you kind of decipher what population of Jewish migration it might be connected to. But yeah, that's interesting. You'll have to check out your DNA matches to see if you can find some DNA matches that are 100% Jewish. Dan Edwards, done Ancestry and 23andMe, transferred my heritage, transfer autosomal to FTDNA, did Y and mtDNA at FTDNA. Yeah, so I guess I'll go into the history of my DNA testing. So when I first DNA tested, I did it in 2013. At the time, Family Tree DNA had a kit that you could buy, or a package, I guess you could say. I want to say they called it the Comprehensive Genome Package. But it wasn't like a whole genome kit or anything. What it was the Family Finder, which is the autosomal DNA test, the full mitochondrial DNA test. So at that time, you could buy mitochondrial DNA tests by either testing the one region, the two regions, or the full. And so I did the full, or the comprehensive came with the full. Nowadays, I think you can only do the one mitochondrial DNA test through them. And then it also came with a Y67 test. So back then you could do Y37, Y67, and I don't know, I don't even think Y111 had come out at that point. I want to say that at that time it was I think you could even still buy Y11. And then there was Y37, Y67, and then you could buy what was known as SNP packages. So you'd buy the packages of SNPs from the general haplogroup that you got. And so it was kind of, from what I remember, it's kind of like a guessing game of, did you get it? Did you get it right? I wonder if I can, I don't know if does anyone know if you can still buy SNP packages from FTDNA? Because I don't think you can. I think they have something kind of equivalent where it's just like, let's see if this is it, SNP packs. Oh yeah, no, it's not even there anymore. See if I can find an old blog article about buying a SNP pack. Yeah, when was this article from? It doesn't have a date, but it's interesting enough. From the H600 project, which is a website I feel like I've come across a couple of times. So yeah, there we go. Yeah. So I don't know when this blog post is from. I was trying to see if I could find a date, but basically you buy the SNP packs. And so they were talking about how you can order it. Single SNP values cost $40, whereas big Y is whatever. So yeah, this is kind of a little on the older side of things, but just an interesting note. So when I did the DNA testing, that's what I did. And that was 2013. Then I actually didn't test again for a while because I want to say it was either a year or two later, I then had both of my parents do a DNA test through Family Tree DNA. Then I I don't remember when it was. At some point, I was asking everyone in my family to DNA test, and then I had my sister took a DNA test through 23andMe. I then had my parents both DNA test through Ancestry. I had my grandmother DNA test through Family Tree DNA. And then not too long ago, actually, probably only like 4 years ago, I had my grandmother test through Ancestry. And then I tested through 23andMe probably 2019, 2020, which was actually pretty late. I didn't think I mean, not that I didn't think I needed to. I knew that I could have stuff that I didn't already have. But because I already had my sister tested on 23andMe, I figured, well, I have access to that. You know, close enough. I know I'll have different matches. And then eventually I kind of just, succumbed to it. I was like, all right, let me do it. Part of it was, my budget for DNA testing hasn't been the greatest until very recently. So, yeah, but my first testing was 2013. And then I'm trying to remember what my first major discovery was. But it definitely took a little bit to figure things out. It took a year or two to really get it down then, especially because it was a lot harder to get, help. There were blogs and stuff like that, but to me, it was very dry and it felt very much like going to school. All right. Let's keep going through some of these. John Tyner, I heard your family is being worked on WikiTree this coming week and not decided if I'm working on it yet. Not been feeling great. My birthday's next Thursday. Yeah, I'm going to be on WikiTree. They have me scheduled for the challenge. So basically, the challenge is different every year. I was one of the challenge contestants a few years ago where that was basically them just trying to build out my tree as much as possible. The newest challenge, which I know, John, you already know all this, but I'm telling everybody, the newest challenge is now they are building out to what's known as the 7th degree, which I think it's actually really interesting because it's a great way for genealogists to learn about the whole idea of degrees and consanguinity and all of that fun stuff. And basically, it's just the idea that, a first degree relative is one step away from you. So what's one step away from you? A parent, a sibling, a child, and then a spouse. Then 2 steps away will be, 1 step away from them. So then you're talking about grandparents and aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews and sister-in-laws and brothers-in-laws and all that kind of stuff, and then extended. So this doesn't like me doing it like that. So for this, they're trying to trace out to my connections, as they call it, the CC7, which I've actually been, funny enough, I've been working on it. I'm going to pull that away for a second because I don't want to show certain living names, although I guess if I do this, it'll show it anyway. But basically, I guess I can show kind of like this. So they have these lists, so I can load degree 5. So like this is 5th degree relatives from me. So one of the things that I've been doing is I've actually been going through and adding in a lot of lines in my family that are living lines that trace then to lines that can be researched, because they limit it. They don't allow the researchers research to see living people, and there's other stuff to it too. So yeah, but that's what they'll be doing. So yeah. Shelley is a fellow WikiTreer. Very cool. Very cool. Eric Sheridan, I've also uploaded my Ancestry DNA to MyHeritage, GEDmatch, and Family Tree DNA. Yeah, that's one other thing. I also uploaded a GEDmatch, and back then, when I first uploaded a GEDmatch, there was also what was known as Y-Search. If anyone remembers Y-Search, throw some emojis in the chat. But Y-Search was basically the Y-DNA version of GEDmatch, run by the same people that did GEDmatch. Or maybe it was just one of the founders. I can't remember if it was one or both or whatever. but then Y Search was taken down. I forgot when. I want to say it was like 2017, 2018. And I don't know who. I think somebody got that data. I don't know who exactly. I want to say that I'd heard that either Dr. Margaret Press or Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick somehow got that data or something. I don't know if that's true or not. I that'd be a great database to be able to tap into. But something happened to that database. It could just be gone. They might have just straight up deleted it. But nowadays, if you want to do the GEDmatch equivalent, they have MitoY, which is a DNA website run by Mags Golden and others too. I forgot the full team. Mags is the one that I always think of for it. So the team. So yeah, Rob Worthen, that's the other one, Kevin Borland, and then a bunch of others, which I know it's a very strong connection between their team and WikiTree, which makes a lot of sense. But basically, you can, if you've done mitochondrial DNA testing or Y-DNA testing, you can upload to MitoY DNA. A lot of people will be like, well, isn't family tree DNA the only place you can do that? Well, technically, but technically not, because you can also do whole genome sequencing, which then gives you that data as well. So there's a lot of people in these sites. So it's kind of also like YFull. YFull is another site kind of like that. Not go to their tree, but with YFull, similar sort of thing. I think most people did 23andMe for the ethnicity and traits, not for genealogy purposes. And that's what 23andMe is leaning into. But they definitely had a big help from the genealogy community in building their database. And then they really kind of spat in a lot of genealogists' faces. I wish I could... here's one of the articles that Roberta had posted. And this is 2016, which, that's a while back, but like it's been like years and years and years of them doing all this stuff that just really took away from the genealogists. And like a big thing was when they limited the amount of relatives that you can get. Jump back to that. They limited the amount of relatives you could get, and 1,500. While a lot of people may think, oh my gosh, 1,500 matches, that's a lot. Well, it may be, but there's, in a lot of these websites, we have people that are matching tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of DNA matches, and matches that are extremely, extremely small are turning out to be very useful. There is a bigger debate in the genetic genealogy world about the usefulness of small segment matches, but I think there is a use for them. It's just a confidence issue of how confident you can be in your hypotheses based on the smaller matches. You need more correlation. I love 23andMe for the chromosome comparison prior to all of that getting removed because of the whole privacy scare last year, alas. Agreed. For a while there, 23andMe was actually quite good in the genealogy space and very competitive, in my opinion, to MyHeritage, because they have the advanced sharing options. Basically, the thing that everyone's going all on and on about with Pro Tools, the advanced shared matches comparison, that's been out with 23andMe and MyHeritage for years, which I totally get where everyone's coming from. Like, oh my God, it's amazing they finally rolled this out. But some people talk about it like it's this crazy new concept that's honestly been something that a lot of us genealogists have been asking for them to do for years. So for me, it's like, thank you. I'm so happy you released it, but I wish you'd released it years ago. Same, if they ever do release a chromosome browser, I do wonder how people are going to react. I think with the chromosome browser, more people are going to think of it as a finally sort of thing, as opposed to what they're doing now with the shared matches Pro Tools thing, where it's like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Like, yes, it is amazing, but we already knew that it was available. Weeping Scorpion, hello, hello. It's always good to have our Faroe Islands representation in the house. My cousin Catherine, in the midst of major collaboration project with two cousins met at the conference. One of them is triangulating our shared DNA matches on MyHeritage and Ancestry. Interesting results so far. Yeah, DNA triangulation definitely is very helpful, and especially if you can do segment triangulation, which you can do through MyHeritage. Can't do it on Ancestry because Ancestry doesn't have a chromosome browser. So yeah. Shelly, I uploaded to MyHeritage. Julia, this was my 5th and last DNA test that I did last month. Yeah, wow. I actually just realized I haven't ended the poll yet. We've had 41 votes. It's been going for 33 minutes. I'm just going to go ahead and end it. So the results were, can I show this on screen somehow? I don't know. But the results were 46% like Ancestry best, MyHeritage 26%, FTDNA 14%, 23andMe 12%. Wow. So when we started talking about it, 23andMe really started to get a lot of votes. And it looks like Ancestry went down a lot, a whole lot. Wow. John Tyner, I ordered my upgrade to 23andMe latest chip, need to do it and send it back. Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever pay for the upgraded chip. At least not this go around. We'll see with maybe future ones. For those who don't know, the way that these DNA tests work is they use what's known as a microarray chip. And these chips are made by a company called Illumina. Microarray chip. Illumina is not the only one who makes the microarray chips, and there's other SNP testing things. But basically, Illumina is kind of the major one that I think most of these companies are using, and they're constantly upgrading it. So these are what the chips look like. And with each chip, there's different SNPs they're testing and different things they're doing. And so with 23andMe constantly updates their chips. And what they'll often do is for certain testers, if they have an upgraded chip, if you tested with an older version of a chip, you may have to pay for the upgrade. And sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it's really not. Kind of depends on what you want to, how you want to deal with it. Obviously, upgrading the chip is the best option because it's going to give you the best results, especially against the newest testers. But it may not be worth the money if you really have a limited budget. I don't know how much they charge for that. Let me know, John. I'll keep an eye out if you answer that. But yeah, they're constantly upgrading these chips. So with what is it with 23andMe? Is this V6 or V7? So V2 is like really, really old one. I think I tested V4, which would have been 2018, 2019. Maybe it was later than that. I can't remember. So 75 pounds. So that's got to be what, like $100 or something like that. Well, I guess I don't know. I don't know. It could be like $150 knowing how the money, how the dollar is. Okay, yeah. Lewis Playford, I've tested with all 5 and took the big Y and mitochondrial DNA through family tree DNA. Yeah, that's the best way to go. If money's no issue, do it all, because that's going to give you the most information. In a sense, you're casting the widest net. Similar to the same idea of if you can upload to the website, do it. They have DNA matches for uploading, definitely do it. Because they may have someone in that website that for whatever reason is only in that website. Alan Zayden, I've gotten a few from FTDNA, including the Big Y test, Imported that along with 23andMe into MyHeritage, and it definitely looks like FTDNA is a lot deeper in terms of accuracy when brought into MyHeritage. Wait, I've gotten a few DNA matches, imported that along with 23andMe. Well, wait. So I'm confused. What you're saying? You imported your Big Y test into MyHeritage? Is that what you're saying? Or you're just saying that you also did the autosomal through MyHeritage? Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'll keep. Let's see, Alan Zayden. Yeah, I'll keep an eye out. All right, MCCB. Hello, everyone from Maureen in London, Ontario, Canada. I did GeneBase, the DNA Ancestry project, back in 2008. Since then, I've done Ancestry 23 MyHeritage. Yeah, GeneBase, I'm not even familiar with. Although I don't know if that, I know there was the Nat Geo project. Like when I first tested, that was when the Nat Geo project had like just kind of been like, we're done. So that would have been 2013. So I don't know if GeneBase might be the predecessor to that. But yeah, Ancestry, 23andMe. From there, you can then upload to every database pretty much. Ancestry and 23andMe are the ones that are the most suggested for people to pay for the DNA test because they're the ones that don't allow uploading. Which I think is going to be a very interesting thing to look into as time goes on, because a big thing that Ancestry boasts, and 23andMe kind of boasted for a while, was how large their databases are. But by all of the other databases like MyHeritage and Family Tree DNA allowing uploads, I wonder if over time MyHeritage is going to catch up to the point where Ancestry having such a larger database isn't as big of a deal. Even at this point, it's very well known that MyHeritage's database has a much larger international representation within the database than on Ancestry. And saying that not necessarily in that it's, all around the world, but just that it's in a lot more places in larger amounts than you find on Ancestry. So like a lot of South American testers, a lot of testers in like Eastern Europe and the Baltic states and the Balkans. At least those are the two in my experience, because I see a lot of those matches in my results, which makes sense coming from a Ashkenazi and Sephardi background. But I imagine for a lot of people who are coming from other places that, people that either have recent immigrant ancestry or people that just still live in areas all around the world that aren't the typical testing places, which are basically the US, Canada, England, Ireland, Scotland, the British Isles, Australia, New Zealand, and then South Africa is actually pretty close behind, I think. But basically like the English-speaking world in a sense. And beyond that, there are some countries that have pretty good representation within the Ancestry and 23andMe and all that. But it's MyHeritage that you find the largest amount outside of that typical sort of database. So, yeah, all very interesting. Oh, we already saw that from Lewis. Okay, posted twice. And then, okay, Alan, FTDNA shows 8% Sephardi ancestry, 83% Ashkenazi, and some West Asian. 23andMe, it's mostly the same results, but the Sephardic and West Asian amounts practically flip and adds a few percent Finnish. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, with 23andMe, they do not have as many categories that they break their Jewish results into. So if you do have a mixture of Ashkenazi and Sephardi, Family Tree DNA has the better opportunity to tell you that. In my experience, and I'm going to see if I can pull up my Family Tree DNA results. My Family Tree DNA results were basically not too far off, but that it wasn't quite, it didn't read like, if you read it and took it as at face value, it wouldn't match up. But when you understand the nuances, it kind of matches up. Okay, so actually I'm not thinking family tree DNA, I'm thinking of MyHeritage. So we'll jump over to MyHeritage in a second. So with family tree DNA, this is my origins. 99% Ashkenazi Jewish with a less than 1% Southern Caucasus, which kind of makes sense just in the general sense of the, lots of Jewish populations for many, many years, correlating DNA, all that fun stuff. Let's see what I can pull up for MyHeritage. So for MyHeritage, let's do that. All right. This. Let's do that. I like that. I like that. Okay, cool. Yeah, save. All right, so with MyHeritage, it breaks it down 85.8% Ashkenazi Jewish. Now you can see that this has not been updated yet. But so this is the old reading, update at some point. Eastern and Central Europe, mostly Poland, all of these are the different, categories they break it down into, and there's so much overlap. This one, obviously, I think is supposed to connect to my Dutch Jewish ancestry, but with Sephardic Jewish, I'm getting 8.1%, and then Mizrahi, I'm getting 6.1%. Now, the interesting thing about it is that it's kind of not too far off, possibly in the sense that, with my Sephardic ancestry, I always have to pull out a calculator for this. So basically, the way that it works is that my great-grandfather, his father was 100% Sephardic, and his mother was 1/8 Sephardic. So basically, that means that he was 5/8 Sephardic. Is that right? No, she was 1/8. So he was, 2/16. So that'd be 9/16 Sephardic, I think it is. So that's my great-grandfather. So my grandfather was half of that. My mom's half of that. And then I'm half of that. So I should have 7.031255% about Sephardic DNA. And 8.1% isn't too far off, but then there's this big question mark of the 6.1% Mizrahi. But this is also one of the issues a lot of people have had when it comes to MyHeritage's admixtures, is that there's no white paper provided. So we don't know any statistical analysis of the quality of these matches. Now, there was a thing we looked at in the last week's stream in my reaction channel that was some sort of chart that kind of gave the precision and recall numbers for the different groupings. And I think the Sephardic and Mizrahi were higher than I remember, or not remember, than I expected. But I want to say they were somewhere between like 60 and 80%, which isn't great, but isn't terrible either. Especially if it was in the 80% area. But something, with when the update comes out, we'll have to see. See how they do. Yeah. All right. Let's go. Mattias, re-super kits. If GEDmatch won't allow you, then there are other players, forget the name, that allow you to merge kits. What's missing, though, is a way to ensure the right kits are merged. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, it doesn't, I don't think it takes a whole lot for people who, know programming to kind of find ways to do that sort of merging sort of thing. There are a ton of third-party websites out there that do all sorts of crazy stuff for DNA. So you probably are right. There are people that can do that. I do wonder how the uploads would be taken, though, because like I know with GEDmatch, I've done a lot of kits that have been rejected by GEDmatch for various reasons and having worked with labs and other people in various ways. Oh, there we go. Okay. Wondered what was going on with that. It sometimes it just spits it out and basically says this doesn't match up right, or it'll upload partially incorrectly. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly, it is certainly something to worry about. And there are a lot of DNA tests all around the world that actually cause issues within GEDmatch. So like a great example of one is this company Genera, which I believe is based in Brazil. Pull it up. And typical DNA tests about 700,000 or so SNPs. I don't know if I want to say I looked into it and I found that they did actually test about 700,000 SNPs with Genera, this company. But basically for a while there, maybe they still have it where you can buy tests where it's not the 700,000 SNPs, it's a lot fewer SNPs. And so that was actually causing like major issues with comparisons because there were so many SNPs missing that it would cause false positive matches. Yeah, John Tyner Mags is a prominent wiki treer. Mags is great. Yu Chen, is it true that 23andMe is the best for East Asian? There's a lack of detail on the ancestry. I honestly don't know. That's not something I really looked into. I really never try to focus too much on what's the best site to test for admixtures. For East Asians, I mean, the best, from my understanding, at least the most nuanced, is if you test with something like WeGene or 23 one of the Asian-based DNA tests. But with 23andMe, I mean, they do release a white paper, so you can look into the white paper and see what are the populations they break down, what are the precision and recall numbers they have behind it, how many people do they have in their population group that they're defining as that, and all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know exactly. I say it all the time. I talk about admixtures and stuff a lot, but I really don't focus too much on like the in-depth stuff with it because I don't find it to be that utterly important when it comes to DNA testing. It's all about the matches. It's very minimally genealogically important, genealogically useful, I guess is what I like to say. Shelly, 23andMe's new redesign is a disaster. You can't read the names if you're far enough out to see where you are. Tree design, that is. Interesting, yeah. Oh, wow, I'm taking a while to get through these chat. I remember looking at 432. Okay, I guess I'm 14 minutes behind. That's not terrible. Dan Edwards on Big Y, not to be tempted to do it because I've done my Y line via paper and confirmed a great grandfather through Y match back to origins of records. Yeah, I mean, to each their own. With the Big Y, I think I've been surprised at how well you really can figure things out in terms of somewhat recent ancestry, but somewhat distant, stuff that's, 800 years ago or 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, and kind of actually getting a little bit of an idea of that story of your paternal line over the past, 1,000 to 2,000 years, whereas these generalized haplogroups at best kind of give you up to about 2,000 years. And even then, it's kind of like a questionable story about some of the stuff. Karma, late to the party, but I'm here. Hello from Nebraska. Yeah, you're late, but you are here. Haven't even been streaming for an hour yet. So, yeah. Alan, I imported the autosomal. Sorry for the clarification. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, the question before, not really a question, just basically saying that you'd done the FTDNA. But then we did talk about your Ashkenazi Sephardi stuff. So, okay, cool. Weeping Scorpion, my heritage is the one I've seen being advertised the most. My heritage is taking a serious go at marketing in every single way they possibly can. I did a commercial for them a few months ago. They've only released it a little bit here and there. I think they said they may be releasing it more. I don't know. But if you saw, there was a commercial that I did for them. It's like a minute long, and it's me just talking about how I use my heritage to help me connect with these South African cousins of mine that had always been a question in the tree of who were these South Africans that visited the family all these years ago. And so that's the commercial, but they sponsor a ton of videos. For one, they've sponsored some of my videos. They are sponsoring some upcoming videos. So for like the Max Miller family tree stuff, they sponsored 5 DNA tests for the family to take. Max, his siblings, and his parents tested through MyHeritage. They gave all those kits. And then they're also sponsoring the first episode of the series. So they're doing a lot of stuff to, get their name out there in every single way. And they're being very smart about it too. When they came to me about doing advertisements and, all this stuff, I was like, I'm totally fine with it. As long as you give me the ability to talk about MyHeritage fully. I'm not going to hold back on things that are negatives. And I say it all the time that they are the most notorious company for having the least liked admixture. They're the company known for having the, lack of a better way to say it, the worst admixture out there, but they're still also the company, in my opinion, that has the best genetic genealogy tools. But, if they had said we'll only allow you to say good things, I would have been like, okay, it's not worth it. But because they said, we just want the word out there, you say whatever you need to say, totally cool with it. And they are talking to a lot of other content creators. They're doing a lot of sponsorships with a lot of others. I know Joseph Hall Patton, the Cynical Historian, he did a couple of sponsorships with them. I want to say Mr. Beat's done a couple of sponsorships with them. Useful Charts has done some. They've done sponsorships with tons of creators. And for a long time, 23andMe was the company that did the most DNA test videos on YouTube. And then probably about 4 or 5 years ago, MyHeritage started to come in. Hold on one second. I'm getting a call. It's my dad. Sorry. The all important, are you coming over for dinner call? So, all right. Well, let's continue. Katrina Walker, the only places that I've actually tested was Ancestry and 23andMe. I uploaded those pretty much everywhere else. And that is the way that most people suggest you do it, especially for those on a budget. Test through the 2 that don't allow uploading, then upload to the others. I don't know which ones it is now. I need to keep up with this stuff a lot better, but because I'm not dealing with it in terms of paying for stuff as much, I don't really remember as well. But I know there are some sites that do have certain things held back if you're uploading, and so you have to pay to access certain features. But even so, I don't think it's a lot. If anyone knows exactly, comment below, or comment in chat. Comment below, but comment in chat. But as far as I know, I think it's maybe like $20 or $30 or like a one-time fee sort of thing, which is really not that bad when you're comparing it to paying $100 for a kit. Although granted, nowadays a lot of DNA kits are on sale for $30 or $40. Brian, how we got here, genealogy. I like MyHeritage. I find it better matches for my British Isle matches. Interesting. PZ, MyHeritage can have all the graphs they want. It's not a white paper. They still use V.95 categories and V2 portion of the graph. So it's redundant. The B2 update is woeful. MyHeritage's claim that Italian is now more accurate is a lie. People with Italian ancestry are losing their Italian and getting French. Worst update ever. I will not recommend this company. I mean, okay. For one, they haven't fully rolled out their update. So, I don't know. The kind of harsh words, I guess, when it's not even fully rolled out. They did a test rollout, got a lot of feedback, and now they're trying to fix it. But at the same time, to me, a lot of the people that are like, I won't recommend a company because of their admixture is kind of like, I'm not going to recommend that car because it's got a bad radio. Like, it's like, what's it matter? The engine or the DNA matches, the admixture's the fun radio. Like, to me, the people that focus so much on the admixture, I mean, I guess depending on how you're coming from it, maybe there's a reason, but genealogically, it's like pointless. There's no point in focusing so harshly on the admixtures. If there was a company that had the absolute worst admixture that didn't even match up at all, but then had the best and most robust DNA matching database with the best tools available that allowed you to solve the most cases and whatnot, then that to me, that would be so much more. But yeah. All right. Alan, what I'm trying to understand is I'm Ashkenazi with Sephardi ancestry. I've got a common ancestor with the Maharal of Prague, but beyond that, it's confusing to me understanding the DNA aspects of it. Sephardic connection, according to FTDNA, circa 600 CE. So I get there's a common ancestor with the others in the haplogroup back to about that point, but it still feels so vague even after Big Y. Well, one thing I can tell you for having a Y DNA test and coming from a Jewish line, look into the Avatenu Y DNA project. They are by far the best people to tell you what's going on. So if you go to this site right here, you can connect your results. Log out. So you can. All right, so you can connect your results, and they will tell you a lot more about what's going on. They'll give you a much better idea. But as well, then you're also going to be helping with the project in a sense. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly when it comes to Y-DNA, even someone like me, I often have to consult with my friend Michael Waz, who you can actually see is one of the co-administrators. And then the other two who are administrators here, Adam Brown and Raquel Leovitz-Lidano, are both people that I know quite well. I've hung out with them many a time. Although Raquel, I've only hung out with once in London. Well, a couple of times in London, I guess you could say. But all extremely knowledgeable, some of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to Y-DNA testing. And with some of the Y-DNA results, even with Big Y, it can be a little confusing. And, you know, just like autosomal, there's all of this nuance to it that is very unique where you have to understand that. And so, you know, like one of the things I learned from them was how when it comes to Y-DNA testing, one of the ways that we can get an idea of certain things going on in the past is how many Y-DNA, how many new haplogroups are coming up. Because we know that there's a mutation, I want to say it was 1 in every 5 births. So for every 5 sons born to a man, one of them will likely have a mutation on their Y-DNA. So using that information, they can actually see when times were wonderful, because when times were great and food was abundant, it was very easy to live. Well, that means that people were having a lot of kids. And so a lot of kids equates to more mutation happening in a shorter period of time. Whereas if you have a time period where it's very difficult to live, it's very difficult for people to survive, and only very few sons will survive, well, now the 1 in every 5 births, well, let's say if there's only 1 son every generation, that means now it's going to be 5 generations until there's another mutation. So there's these things like that that are the nuances that go on with the DNA inheritance and mutation rates that allow us to figure these in-depth things out. So that's one of the things I learned from Adam Brown, actually. You can actually look up a bunch of talks from him. He's quite interesting person, very knowledgeable. But this would be a project I would suggest uploading to, looking into. Contact them, see if they can tell you anything about it, especially if you're getting this Sephardic connection 600 CE. PZ for Ashkenazim, I actually recommend Living DNA, 80 and Intro, or DNA Genetics because it shows where we actually cluster, i.e., a mix of Southern Europe and West Asia. My heritage is good for matches family tree. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, all I really care about is the matches family tree. Like Living DNA, 80 and Intro, DNA Genetics. I mean, they're not really. I mean, Living DNA is decent in the genealogy community. 80 and Intro is okay. DNA Genetics, I'm not familiar with at all. But even being familiar with two of the three, they're not really ones that are used as much in the genealogy community. Living DNA has a chance to break through, but I think they have a lot of stuff they need to improve. Jan de Van. Hi from the Netherlands. Hello, Huhachet. I also tested autosomal DNA at all 5 companies, including Big Y and Full-Minded DNA at FTDNA, as did my father and sister. Sister, obviously not Y-DNA. I uploaded all our kits to every site possible, including GEDmatch, and created all possible super kits. Very interesting. I'm curious to know, for how many matches have all of you been able to figure out how you are related to them exactly? Full path to common ancestors. We're up to just over 400 people now. I think it's really going to vary for a lot of people. Coming from a Dutch ancestry, it certainly makes a lot of sense. You're going to have hundreds of people because, for one, I feel like there's a lot of people that I know from the Netherlands who are doing DNA testing, as well as a lot of Dutch descendants who do DNA testing from all over the world. At the same time, the Dutch have the best records. They also have that law, I can't remember what it's called, that's basically the government reuse of records law or something like that, which basically says any records digitized and put up online by the government has to be freely available. So you get websites like Vivas V and Stenen Archief and the Amsterdam Archief and, you know, all of these amazing archives, Archiefgementen, that, you know, are really robust and easily accessible. And a lot of them too are doing very advanced sorts of stuff. So as an example, the Amsterdam archives has their Transcribus project, where they've been going through and using Transcribus on records from the Amsterdam archives. And so then it's going through things like notarial records and the actual what's written in the document. So you get that kind of stuff. Wow, it's taking forever to load. But yeah, so for someone with Dutch ancestry, like, you're doing pretty good. One thing that you can do, let's see, did you tested through Ancestry? Yeah, all 5. One fun thing to do is go through your through lines on Ancestry, and you'll probably see so many matches. Nick, goedenavond, Vino Groningen, ben ik te laat? Yeah. Not too late. Gosh, this is a problem with me speaking Dutch, is I speak so little Dutch. I just learn it online. I never know what to say. Yeah. Ik zei niet. But hello, hoe gaat het? Hope you're well. Welcome. Katrina, the admixtures are the sprinkles on the ice cream. Not really needed, but just makes everything better. The ice cream is what I'm after, not the sprinkles. Yeah, that's a good analogy too. You know, one thing I always say is the admixtures are the least genealogically useful part of the DNA test, or I guess technically they're not the least genealogically useful. The traits and the medical stuff is the least genealogically useful. There's no genealogy use for that really. But of the genealogically useful bits, it is the least useful part. But yeah, just the sprinkles on the ice cream, or yeah. I always like to say the radio equivalent, because people are always talking about, well, should you get that, or should you get that, or should you get that? And so it's like, you know, if you're going to buy a car, well, what are you going to decide in your choice of which car to buy? Is it going to matter more about the engine, or is it going to matter more about the radio? For some people, maybe it's the radio. Kemte, the problem for me is that I am Circassian. No other DNA site besides Family Tree DNA has listed this ethnicity. On Family Tree DNA, I'm 85% Circassian, but on my heritage, I get a total mix of West Asia. Balkan and Welsh and Scottish. Will there be an update on this in the future? I don't know. I mean, well, I guess for my heritage, we do know there's going to be an update. Ancestry, I want to say, announced an update too. Granted, I know you're not asking about that. Let's see if it pulls it up. But yeah, my heritage is going to be doing an update. They did a first initial rollout very recently. And after that initial rollout, they got a lot of responses back. And the responses back, I'm guessing, weren't that great because they have since then been working on it further. Okay, that is not what I was looking for. Okay, I guess I can't find it. But so my heritage, they will be doing a rollout at some point. Just keep that on the screen. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Ancestry, I think we'll do it. And all of them are going to do it. It's just a matter of when and then what are they going to update. But it's kind of the same thing that we've been saying over and over, and that even if they do get it to read more along the lines of what you're expecting for your family tree, it really isn't going to make that large of a difference in the end of things, because it's going to matter more about DNA matches. The only major thing that's really obtained for the genealogical usefulness of the admixtures and updating them is when you are more confident in what it's telling you about your results. You're more confident in the outliers of what you would expect. So if everything you get is not what you would expect, then it's just a clustered, like, what's going on here? But if you're like Jewish and you get 90% Jewish reading and then 10% British, well, then it's going to be like, well, okay, that's very weird. That 10% British is an outlier. But if you're Jewish and you're getting Italian and British and all this stuff and almost none or no Jewish, then yeah, it certainly is like, what can I even trust? So if you come from a Circassian ancestry and Family Tree DNA is giving you 85% Circassian, then the usefulness in that is that, okay, well, whatever they're not reading as Circassian, there's maybe a bit higher of a confidence in maybe that is an actual ancestry you have, as opposed to less of a confidence because everything's kind of all crazy. If that makes sense. Hopefully it does. So, yeah. Max Snow. Wow. Veel Nederlanders in the chat. Yeah. Veel Nederlanders here. That's the end of the chat. Oh, wow. I caught up. All right. So let's see. I guess I was talking about in the beginning, looking at some of the updates from the different companies. It's like some of the blogs and stuff for the announcements. Here we go. Ancestry News. Yeah, so for Ancestry, I don't think there's really anything to talk about that much, because we did already talk about the Pro Tools. So, June this year, they rolled out Pro Tools, which is the advanced shared matching, which, for my most recent which DNA test is the best DNA test video, I said my heritage, and a large amount of that had to do with the fact that my heritage had the advanced shared match comparison, which is just like how they show it to you here for Ancestry. But then they also have the auto cluster, they have the chromosome browser, and then I think they make it a little bit easier in some respects for some things. Both companies have, an equivalent of through line / theory of relativity, where they're looking at your DNA and how you have it linked in your family tree and comparing that to all of your DNA matches to see, do your trees have a link that could explain your DNA matching and all of that. So that stuff is great. But for, a bit there, Ancestry really kind of was far back from my heritage, in my opinion, of genealogical usefulness. The main thing my Ancestry had was through lines, and they had the biggest database. Beyond that, no chromosome browser, no advanced shared match comparisons. Now they do have the shared match comparisons, but it is hidden behind this paywall that they call Pro Tools. And Pro Tools is something they've had for a while out, but it's not something that a lot of people have said is useful until this, because before, I think basically Pro Tools was it's like a fact checker, an accuracy checker for your tree, and then there are a couple other basic things with it, but this is the first largely useful tool for Ancestry. So I still think at this point, MyHeritage is the best test for genealogical usefulness, considering the tools that they have. But Ancestry is certainly coming up from behind on that. The thing that Ancestry has to look out for, though, is that the big thing that attracts people to them more than anything is their advertising, the fact that, they're connected to all these huge TV shows like Who Do You Think You Are? And they do all of these different things with, all these different companies. And they also, they have the largest database. But then with MyHeritage, they're really trying to expand their marketing. They're trying to go for kind of a different marketing on a much more, or not organic, but more social media stuff. Like Ancestry really has never done a lot of sponsoring YouTubers or sponsoring things like that. Like, it's always been much larger projects in my experience. I could be wrong on that. Whereas with MyHeritage, it's like they're going for all of the small people and, all the YouTubers and podcasts and, a lot of these other places. And having the upload available as well, I think that there's a strong possibility for MyHeritage in the next few years to increase their database to a point that it is in line with Ancestry. It will be a lot of work. I don't remember what the numbers are right now, but it is definitely difference of millions, if I remember correctly. But there's a strong possibility, and especially with with Ancestry doing some of the things that 23andMe did in terms of putting up more paywalls for other tools. So like putting the shared matches thing behind Pro Tools. I forgot there's a few other things that I think that that used to be available if you didn't have an Ancestry membership, and then they took that away. So now you have to have an Ancestry membership, and basically just kind of various nickel and diming sort of things where it's a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there. And that's going to be the stuff that's going to slowly push people away from wanting to be on Ancestry. So, Ancestry's name, I think, is one of the biggest things going for it. They've just been in the game so long, and they're just such a trusted name in general that, yeah, it's going to be a tough road. But I think if any company has the possibility of overtaking Ancestry as like the place to test, I think it could be MyHeritage. Granted, I think both will always really be there. But yeah. Neek, I just got my DNA results from Ancestry last week, and my parents on MyHeritage. Lots of interesting results. I think it was a good choice to first do research of descendants of my ancestors. Yeah, I'm sure that worked out really well, because when you saw your DNA matches, you recognized some of the names, or at least some of the surnames. And then probably you look at their trees and boom, you can figure out, oh, wow, okay, I know exactly how we connect. So yeah, that's the best way to go about it. Much easier now. Yeah. Bryce, hello. I feel like you said hello earlier. I feel like I recognized that avatar unless somebody else has the same avatar. PZ, I do agree that matches are more than the estimates. I can't fault MyHeritage when it comes to matches. I get tons of matches on Living DNA too, but MyHeritage has the best tools. Yeah, with Living DNA, I have had no good matches. I also come from a Jewish ancestry, and Living DNA does not have any sort of Jewish readings in their admixtures. So I think a lot of people who have Jewish ancestry don't really go on Living DNA. They do allow uploads though. So, it is another database, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who have tested only with Living DNA and have not uploaded elsewhere. But at this point, it's very reminiscent of me of when I first tested through Family Tree DNA, where it was like nothing very useful at all. A shekel here, a shekel there adds up. Yeah, it does. Weeping Scorpion. See, we have that in gaming. It's called microtransactions. Yeah, yeah. It's a good thing that they don't charge you per every one you look up. Because it's crazy to me how there are some websites that will do stuff like that. Like there was a Ukrainian research website that I actually had a video about for a while. I ended up taking it down because this website did a lot of things I did not agree with. But one of the things was like for a while there, they had a very simple indexing system. So if you looked through their database, you would find a little bit of information, but not really that much. So you'd still want to order the record. And then after I did my video, it wasn't that long. It's maybe within a year or so. I forgot exactly what it was. Then they made it where every time you had to pay every time you wanted to search for a record just to order. And I was like, that's ridiculous. And then there was a whole bunch of other stuff that went on where I was like, okay, I'm taking this video down. So the video is still available for my Patreon and YouTube members in my special YouTube member Patreon playlist. But yeah, it's not a video that, I really push out because it's not a website I want to promote at all. Drea, I haven't been on Living DNA in ages. I should check on that. Yeah, I will admit I have not logged into my Living DNA account in probably at least a year and a half. So maybe there were some matches on there that I haven't seen, but yeah. Eric Sheridan, do the DNA test kits have a shelf life? Yes and no. It's a really mixed thing. Like I've had some DNA kits where I bought the DNA kits and then I kind of sat on them for a while because I wanted someone to test with it, and it was no issue. Then I had another one, which was actually a Nebula whole genome sequence kit, where I sat on it because I was waiting for one of my cousins to agree to do it because I was looking for a specific line of my family because I wanted the Y DNA to be part of it. And so it took me like a year and a half before I finally found a cousin from a line that was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then I sent it to them. They sent it in, and then they were told that it was too old of a DNA kit. It was only like a year and a half old or something like that. So not all of them do. Granted, Nebula is a whole genome sequence company, and I think they also send their stuff out to labs in China. So very possible there was something else going on with that. But yeah, I don't know. So I think my best suggestion would be whatever company it is, contact them and ask. Because I'm guessing it varies by company. Jan, MyHeritage is still well behind in DNA database site compared to Ancestry and 23andMe. MyHeritage is at 8.5 million kits, 23andMe at 14 million, and Ancestry 25 million. Yeah, so I mean, they're definitely behind, but they have the possibility to do it. 23andMe does not have the possibility to do it, I don't think. I think so few genealogists suggest 23andMe nowadays. I think that 23andMe, most people that are doing it for health reasons. And then the other thing is with 23andMe, I don't know if I've ever seen an answer to this question, but I've seen multiple people ask it. Does that 14 million number include people who have said they do not want to be included in the DNA matching on 23andMe? Because 23andMe has the ability to hide your DNA kit, which I know a lot of people do. Like my uncle tested through 23andMe and hid his kit, and then he couldn't remember how to log back in, and so now it's just not available. But like, and I'm on 23andMe and he doesn't show up. So there's, that's a question with it, but there is a lot of work ahead of them. There's no question about it. They're behind, but they have a great possibility, especially with the fact that people can upload, and with the fact that if they can improve the admixture so that people aren't talking about them like they are now, that's going to be a big boost in getting people to test there, because unfortunately, a lot of people only care about the ethnicity estimates. And with MyHeritage being the one that most people say don't test with them for the estimates. And I mean, I see this all the time on Reddit, on Facebook, on Twitter, on my YouTube comments. People constantly say MyHeritage is the worst. MyHeritage is the furthest from the one that, my admixture and what I know of my family tree. But nobody said, or very few people, only the ones that are obsessed with genealogy, talk about the fact that they have the best genealogy stuff. So if they can improve that admixture, I think that's the biggest piece that it's going to rely on. So if when they finally roll out the update, if things are basically the same and it's not a huge improvement, of people saying, yes, this DNA test is definitely one to take because of the admixture results, then I don't think they have a chance. But if they do actually do it, where they get it to roll out and there's a ton of people that basically, turn around and say, this is amazing, this is one of the best now, then they have a true possibility with it, I think. But really only then. So that's kind of what I'm saying. Katie, I'm late to the party. I have done an Ancestry and 23 DNA kit and uploaded my Ancestry one to all the sites I can think of. My great uncle just did the Ancestry test. I got him yesterday. Very cool. Yeah, the fact that you got your great uncle to test is awesome. The best thing to always do is get the oldest generation to test. Doesn't matter about age, it matters about generation. So if your grandparent has a sibling who is 40 years younger than your grandparent, doesn't matter that they're 40 years younger. It just matters that they were the same generation. So get them to test, because the closer the closer you are to older generations, the better information you get for that side of the family. So, your great uncle only represents 1/4 of your ancestry, because you have, 4 grandparents. Your great uncle is a sibling to one of those grandparents. So that's going to give you a ton of information on that quarter of your family tree. And so, yeah, that's awesome to hear. That's awesome to hear. I got my grandmother to do a DNA test, which I'm so happy about. She's still alive. She just turned 97 earlier this year, turns 95 in January. But I wish I'd gotten my other grandparents to DNA test. Wait, I already read that one. Oh, yeah, you just posted it twice. Okay. Neek, do you let your family members pay for their own DNA kit? What's your sales pitch? So throughout the years, it's varied. Obviously, it depends what's your money, what's, all of that. When I was basically a broke college student and then a broke musician / cook / optician, that was basically me asking them and basically saying, would you be willing to do a DNA test? I can't pay for it, but it would really, really help me out. In fact, when I did my first DNA test, part of why I was able to do it was because 3 separate cousins of mine sent me $100 each to be able to go and do it. I think my first test cost I want to say it was $359.99 plus whatever tax and shipping was back then. So it was probably close to $400 or something. So, it ended up being, $100 from each of them and then $100 out of my own pocket, which I think my parents ended up paying me or giving me some money for it too. So, then it was, just kind of like basically saying, if you would DNA test, it could help us this way. And here's the information. And, I wish I could pay to do it, have you do it, but I just don't have the money, sort of thing. And that sort of thing. Nowadays, I'm much more selective of who I ask, but also that's partly because I say, if you're willing to do it, I'll buy the test for you. And it's a mixed bag of things. some people do it, some people don't. It's been surprising to me how many people are like, oh yeah, I'll do it. Don't worry about buying it for me. Which that's always awesome. But I mean, the sales pitch really, it's going to vary, but the largest thing is to explain what the big benefit is. What could you possibly learn from it? And especially if you can explain why they are the one that should do it. It's very easy, especially, in that terms, if it's like a Y-DNA or mitochondrial DNA test, because then it's like, you're the only one, or you're one of the only three, or whatever. But it's really just kind of figuring out what's the benefit. And if you know them or have an idea about them as well, and you might know, oh, they're really into history, and well, this is going to tell us this about our history, or that about our history, or whatever. So that's really the thing. So if you have the money for it, I often suggest that's the best way to go about it. If you're going to be asking someone to do DNA tests, you should also be willing to pay for it, or at least part of it. And if you are, that certainly should be part of the sales pitch, if you're willing to pay for part of it or all of it, because that will relieve a lot of people's tension about it. And for some people too, you can even offer to say, order from whatever site that you feel you'd prefer, and whatever, here's the ones that I'd be willing to pay for if, you have a limited budget, and just send me how much it is, and I'll send you a thing through Venmo or whatever. Because that way people then have more control, because, there's two things that you're working with when you're pitching do a DNA test. One, you're telling them why it's a benefit, but two, you're trying to also relieve as much question in terms of nefariousness that you can. So if they're ordering the test themselves, they can research it themselves and look into it and talk to other people about it and whatnot. And then, that way it's not a question of, well, I'll buy it for you and have it sent to you. Because if that's happened, then, well, did they really send it? Is this, what's going on here, sort of thing. So I guess that's the way that I go about it. But yeah. Yeah, I paid for my great uncle's test when there was a sale. Yeah, and that's one thing a lot of people do too, is when there's sales, they'll buy a bunch of DNA tests and then wait for people that they want to have test it. Yes, but if somebody gives me a Lamborghini, but it has a CD player still, I'm still going to take it. Yeah. So jumping back to that analogy with the ethnicity estimates. Sharp Lisa, I got my grandma test just before she passed at 100 years old. Her brother also did a test. Wow, that's awesome to have your grandmother and her brother to have tested, especially in the fact that you might be able to do visual phasing with their DNA results. Especially if you have like another sibling of theirs that might be able to DNA test, or close relatives you might be able to use, maybe first cousins, or maybe even a child of one of their other siblings or something like that. But if you haven't learned about visual phasing, look into visual phasing. Very useful, because basically what you would be able to do is you'd be able to figure out what parts of your grandmother's DNA came from which one of her grandparents. And then that allows you to correlate it against your DNA matches to see which side of that family are your DNA matches coming from. Sharp Lisa, I didn't get my dad tested before he passed, so I asked his sister to take a test. She did. That's cool. Drea, I've taken to buying a few like once or twice a year during the really good sales, and then I have them available for folks when it comes up. That's worked out pretty well for me. Yeah, that is a very common one to do. Eric Sheridan, I wish FTDNA allowed you to manage other people's DNA tests like Ancestry does. Yeah, that is one of the big negatives with Family Tree DNA and 23andMe, is that you have a login for every single DNA test. The only thing that you can do where you won't have multiple logins is if you have a single person doing the Family Finder test, the mitochondrial test, and the Y-DNA test. That can all be under one kit number. But for most everything else, if you have multiple people testing, you're going to have a different kit number and login for each one, and it makes collaboration terrible. They do have their Family Tree DNA projects, But it's not. It's just it's in my opinion they should roll something out that allows much better collaboration. And Anna Tommaso, hello, Anna, you made it. Yeah, I was wondering where you were. You're one of the first ones here. So I guess busy Friday. Okay. AJ Burke held onto a kit from Ancestry and FTDNA for a while to give my centurion sister of my great grandmother. Oh, cool. Hopefully they accepted it. I think with most of the main consumer companies, Ancestry, Family Tree DNA, MyHeritage, what can I think? 23andMe. I think all of them have it where basically, you've got a long shelf life with the kits. But with Living DNA, I don't know. And then obviously with Nebula, in my experience, it doesn't have a shelf life very long. Doctor's appointment. Karma, I'm glad I got my parents to test. Wish my grandparents were here to test. My paternal grandpa passed in 2003. He was the last of my grandparents. Their siblings were all too spread out to ask them. Yeah, that's a shame. One thing that I'm looking forward to is once artifact testing improves a lot. So artifact testing is DNA testing items that may have DNA from your ancestors on it. So maybe a hairbrush or dentures, or maybe a big one a lot of people use are stamps that were on an envelope. So if your great-great-grandmother wrote a letter to somebody and you have that envelope, it's possible your great-great-grandmother licked that stamp, and so you might be able to get DNA from it. A lot of stuff to work on and improving that technology, both in the DNA side of things, as well as, general populace learning how to work with degraded DNA and genealogy sites, because that's something that a lot of people don't deal with unless you're working in investigative work. So that's one of the things a lot of people have to learn about when they get into the investigative world, whether it's just working with DOE cases like the DNA DOE project, or working actual criminal cases or whatever, dealing with degraded DNA and dealing with profiles that have call rates that are in the 80 percentile, or, basically call rates on consumer kits like Ancestry and Family Tree DNA and things like that are like 99%. Remember, we always say a 1% margin of error. Well, that basically means you're looking at a call rate usually of about 99%. But when you're dealing with artifact DNA, you're dealing with degraded DNA, low amounts of DNA, and so you're often getting call rates that are well below 99%. And you can basically a viable profile. I think viable profiles are somewhere in the high 70s. Preferably, it's always 80% or more. I mean, preferably high 90s, obviously, but viable at 80% or more. But I think in the high 70 percentiles too. But it's a whole different thing to learn to work through. I don't know why he's calling me again. I'm still in the live stream. Okay. So I don't even remember my dad's calling me. I don't know if you all could even hear the phone call ringing, but that just threw me off so much because I'm just like, why is he calling me? He just called me. Okay, artifact test. Yeah. So that's one of the things a lot of people will have to learn how to deal with. It's not too difficult to deal with. The way that I kind of equated it whenever I started working with interns when I worked in investigative world was that it's kind of like the learning curve of endogamy. You just kind of have to pick up on some of the patterns of what's going on, and especially in comparing the chromosomes, being able to figure out where there might be gaps and things. So I don't think it's still available, but if you ever saw the video I had for Roots Tech from, I think it was 2021, I did a video all about that, and I talk about Fred scores and Q matching and how we were able to kind of use Q matching to solve a case in a sense. It wasn't just because of the Q matching. That's why I say in a sense. But I had talked in that about how we could look at the segments in the GEDmatch comparisons, the one-to-ones, and basically see where were misreads happening. And by adjusting the Q scores for the Fred scores, that would allow us to see segments that seem to be true segments even though they had very high Q scores. Yeah. Shelley, both of the FTDNA projects I joined are moribund, not helpful. AJ Burke, both tests were successful. Unfortunately, my great aunt passed away shortly after. Once in a lifetime experience. Well, that's good that you were able to get it right before she passed away. John Tyner, I got my mom's first cousin a test on Ancestry. Wish I got him FTDNA Y test, as he is a Williams from Wales. He is now in a nursing home. Wow. Yeah. I mean, if he's in a nursing home, maybe he can. Maybe still. I don't know. Karma may or may not have my maternal grandpa's dentures. I'd have to ask my mom. Yeah, the one thing about artifact testing to really keep in mind, though, is whatever you send in, it's likely you won't get it back. Now, it'll depend going on, in the future, what DNA extraction devices they're using. So like nowadays they have what's known as the MVAC. Let's see if I can pull it up. MVAC system for DNA collection. So this was let's see if we can even see it. So basically it's like a wet device to extract DNA. I don't know why trying to find a good image of it or something. So I guess we'll just go with this sort of thing. Here we go. So if funny enough, if anyone's an asthmatic like me, it kind of actually looks like a nebulizer. It's like not too dissimilar. But yeah, basically, this is a DNA extraction device, and so what it does, I never used it, so I'm not the greatest with it, but I did understand how it worked. Is basically, you can kind of see it right here. Oh, if it'll allow me. So basically, you're taking it, and it's like spraying water and kind of sucking it back up to try to extract the DNA out of it into a liquid mixture, and then you can create a DNA profile from it. So you can see here they use it on rocks, and they can use it on all sorts of various items, so you don't have to destroy the item itself. So this is the MVAC, but for a lot of items, it has to be destroyed for them to be able to extract the DNA. So it'll depend also in the future what type of DNA extraction devices they're able to come up with. Did you see the article on Saint Teresa body reopened after 442 years? No, interesting. Saint Teresa. Body of Saint Teresa of Avila in almost perfect condition. Interesting. Huh. Yeah, if they do DNA testing, that'd be pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool. F. Austin, artifact testing, that is interesting. Always wondered if testing sites would ever do that, short of committing some criminal act. So actually, there's two websites that already do artifact testing. One is called Keepsake DNA, and Keepsake DNA is owned by a company called Intermountain Forensics, which was bought by my most recent employer, DNA Labs International. So they do artifact testing. The one that's been around for the longest is called To the Letter DNA. So both of these companies do artifact testing. MyHeritage also announced, I think at RootsTech this year, that they plan to have artifact testing at some point, which is going to be another big thing for them to be able to overtake Ancestry if they offer artifact testing and Ancestry doesn't. But I would not be surprised if Ancestry was also looking into or at least considering it. So it is available, but it's going to be a matter of implementing a lot of newer technologies to make it easier to extract DNA and have a higher viability of creating an actual genetic genealogical profile, aka an actual viable autosomal SNP profile. Hello, 937-37392. Hi, Wookie. Well, hello. Always good to have our Twitch contingency chatting a little bit. Twitch has been a little late today, actually. Usually I have like 3 or 4 people hanging out in there. Only one right now. So for those who don't know, I stream on Twitch and YouTube, trying to kind of have Twitch as something where, you know, something ever happens to YouTube, which, you know, for anyone who didn't notice, Genealogy TV ran into an issue of YouTube taking down one of her channels, one of Connie's channels. Back up, and I think everything's back to normal now, but it's still a scary thing. So I have Twitch as kind of a, hey, let me build something there because you never know what could happen. So if you're not on Twitch, or sorry, if you're on YouTube, but you're not following me on Twitch, jump on over to Twitch and be sure to follow me there as well. And for the few people in Twitch, if you're not also following me on YouTube, definitely follow me there too. So yeah. John, is your dad okay? Maybe something wrong? Oh, trust me, he is very good at calling and texting me in ways that make me think something's wrong. And it's funny because I try to tell him about it all the time. And I've talked to other people, and like a lot of other people say this is the same thing with their parents. But with my dad, one of the things he likes to text is call me, or I need to talk to you, you know, things like that. And I'm always like, you need to like tell me what's going on. And so now what he'll do is call me. Everything's okay. So, I think it's funny, but yeah. Neek, how do you manage the trees on all the different sites? I use my own PC program and uploaded a GEDCOM to Ancestry MyHeritage, but can I update the trees with a new GEDCOM? So I don't know if you can update the trees with new GEDCOMs. I think you just basically upload GEDCOMs and create new trees within Ancestry and MyHeritage. You know, the way that I treat it all is that I have like an Ancestry tree as my main tree. Oh, funny enough, my mom just texted me and she said it was a pocket dial. So if my parents are watching, hi mom, hi dad. Yeah, so the way that I do it is I have Ancestry now as my main tree. Used to not always be that way. I used to kind of treat my Genie tree as my main tree. But I've hit the, you know, point of having so many random things that I've had to go back and fix and do that I kind of, you know, I say not long ago, but I guess at this point that would have been like 2018 or so that I made that change. But basically, you know, I started doing Ancestry as my main tree. I do have trees on MyHeritage as well. I don't keep up with those as much. I'm not the biggest fan of MyHeritage's family tree setup. You know, I find it a little bit harder and clunkier than the other sites. The biggest usefulness I find for it, the main reason I update it, is for the theory of relativity stuff tied to the DNA kits. But for otherwise, I basically do Ancestry as the main, and then once I'm updating Ancestry, I then will try to update Genie from there. It used to be I'd use Smart Copy on Genie. There's been some issues with Smart Copy and Ancestry after Ancestry did a big update with things. Can't remember if they fixed the Smart Copy thing on Genie. I need to look into that. But then beyond that, that's kind of the way I treat it. So Ancestry really is the main place I do family tree building, just because the way that it's connected into their records database makes it the easiest to use. So yeah. Karma Gal, we do have a ring that belonged to my maternal grandma, but my sister and I have both tried it on and we wouldn't have wanted to part with it. Yeah, that's something that's another issue with artifact testing is contamination. Even if you put it in a Ziploc bag, if you were handling it, it's contamination of other insects or animals or whatever, if you have a dog in the house or what, just this is stuff we deal with when I was working in investigative genetic genealogy and forensics. We would constantly have to deal with what type of DNA is in the mixture. That was actually an issue that was something a lot of the SNP labs had to learn. So like gene by gene, this was something that they didn't test for beforehand because they were used to getting samples directly from people. But if that Roots Tech talk I was talking about, I did one video, and then my colleague at the time, Mary Beth Sciaretta, who's a very, very interesting person, a DNA analyst, very, very knowledgeable person. And she did a video for Roots Tech talking about issues going from a forensic lab to a genealogy lab. And that was one of the things she talked about was the contamination issue and the issue of these autosomal SNP labs not testing for not testing for other non-human DNA. Oof. Give a little asthma away to everybody. All right. Drea, yes, the ominous parent text. Yeah, I know I'm not the only one that gets that. The older generation in texting, yeah. True Serum, you speak from a personal perspective as if admixture should be inconsequential to everyone. Well, your DNA probably stems from one small continent. Some of us have 4 more continents in our ancestry. No, my ancestry spans all across the world with my family constantly on the move. So, it's, yeah, I mean, yes, I am speaking from personal perspective, but even if somebody is coming from a massively mixed ancestry, that doesn't change the fact that the ethnicity admixture is the least genealogically useful part of the genealogically useful tools for DNA tests. The DNA matches are what matters most. It doesn't matter how many continents your family come from. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I see your point, but I also kind of disagree just in that sense that, yeah, there's going to be some people that for DNA testing, the DNA matches are going to be much harder utilized because the DNA paper trail isn't there. And that's something that I deal with all the time. I mean, I have a great grandmother where if the DNA paper trail was much more robust, I could probably figure out her ancestry, but because it's just not there, it's a huge question mark. So yeah, the admixture can be a stand-in in the cases where people can't figure anything out, but yeah. Eric Sheridan, doesn't MyHeritage own Genie? Yes, they own Genie, but Genie is very different than MyHeritage and how the family tree software works. You can definitely tell when you use MyHeritage that there are things that Genie has adopted, or that MyHeritage adopted from Genie. Or at least as someone who had been on Genie for many, many years, I go on MyHeritage and I'm like, oh, I know that from Genie. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, it's just like a MyHeritage owned company. Jan Devane, for safety, I have my main tree, 64,000 people, both at Ancestry and MyHeritage, and always make sure I update them simultaneously. Yeah, and I know that's how a lot of people do it. I have my trees on every site that I possibly can for the concept of cousin bait, but I only update a few here and there. It's very difficult to constantly be updating every single one. That's why I focus mostly on Ancestry, Genie, and then MyHeritage a little bit. I have a tree on GenieNet. I have trees. Trying to think of what other sites I have trees on. But basically anywhere that I could find to put a tree, but yeah, trying to update them all the time. It's just so difficult. Eric, I just export the GEDCOM from Ancestry as a backup. You can load the GEDCOM to MyHeritage. Yeah, you can load them. I don't know if you can like basically say, you know, okay, for my grandfather, update from him using this GEDCOM sort of thing, you know, and then it adds in all of his ancestors. I think that was what the question was. I could be wrong. Ancestry DNA. I don't know what that was an answer to, but it was an answer to something, I'm sure. F. Austin, not sure best way to word question, but persons testing that predicts genetic profile of parents, grandparents, etc., how fast does accuracy degrade for complete genetic profile of each generation? So I think basically what you're asking is for each generation, basically for each generation as you're going back in time, how much is the accuracy of their ancestry there? And basically, I think that basically what we're really thinking of is not that sense as much, but more of a sense of what is your ancestry or what is your percentages representing. So with your parents, there's 50% of their DNA that you're just not inheriting. So 50% of their DNA, you just don't know. So that's kind of how it's degrading, I guess. I don't know if, you know, maybe you're asking a different question, but this is the reason why when a lot of people say your ethnicity admixtures are usually good for the past 300 to 500 years, it really has to do with how far back are you getting a majority of your DNA from a smaller set of ancestors where you can kind of tell where they're from. Because as you get further and further back, you're going to get to ancestors where you aren't inheriting any actual DNA from them. You descend from them, but you aren't inheriting any DNA from them. A recent, I don't know if it was my most recent, but a recent reaction of mine was to that video, You Don't Descend from All Your Ancestors, which was kind of all about that. And they talked about how as you go, you know, with each generation you go back, the amount of ancestors where you're actually getting DNA from them. And once you get to a point, there's a point where only 1% of your ancestors do you have actual detectable DNA from them that you've inherited from them. So when they say 300 to 500 years, what they're really saying is the general amount of time it takes to get back to the generations where you're inheriting such little DNA from the total number of ancestors at that generation, that it's not giving you a good idea of what your ancestry is. Hopefully that all makes sense. This is getting into like a lot of the more difficult concepts of it to discuss. But basically just think about, you know, there's 50% of the DNA that you're getting from your parents and then 25% and all that going back. So let's see, pull up that banner. You know, and so, you know, once you get back to your fifth great grandparents, you're getting less than 1% of, you know, your DNA from each one of your fifth great grandparents. But that's assuming you're getting DNA from each, you know, one of them. So, you know, you have 128 fifth great grandparents. Is that right? Because you have 8 great, 16 second, 32 third, 64 fourth, 128 fifth. Yeah. So 128 fifth great grandparents. So, you know, get back a little bit further, and then you're in the thousands of ancestors in one generation. And the possibility of all of those ancestors, you did inheriting DNA from them, it gets lower and lower. So that's kind of where they're coming from with it. Gazillion. Yes, I always laugh when my heritage or ancestry suggest a match very remote and proudly announce common ancestral lands include Portugal. Yeah. Sometimes they really just say the most basic of stuff. But at the same time, if you were adopted and had no clue, that might have been something that was like, oh my God, it's amazing. But yeah, it's a lot of, you know, basic stuff. Oh yeah, just posted twice. WikiTree. Oh yeah, WikiTree. So yeah, WikiTree. I can't believe I missed WikiTree. Yeah, WikiTree is one that I don't update a lot. Part of that being that with the challenge that happened a few years ago, and then the challenge that's about to happen, I find that I guess I have a lot of people helping update it for me. I have been doing a lot of updating in my WikiTree over the past few days, but that's largely in getting it prepared for the challenge because I want to give more people the more lines to be able to work off of. So basically tracing through living lines to lines that are available to then trace because they're deceased. And so yeah. Into each generation, a genealogist is frustrated. Yes, that made sense and was what I was referring to. Thank you. Okay, awesome. Admixtures change based on updates to the algorithms. That's why I don't rely or care about my admixture. Yeah, very true. They're always going to update. They just give you a general idea. Another analogy I always like to use for admixtures is they're very similar to a blurry painting of your ancestry. So if you have a blurry painting, well, I guess painting, maybe not, but a blurry image of your ancestry. So when you look at the image, you get a general idea of, okay, that might be this or that might be that, but you're not 100% sure. So like if you're looking at an image where, there's like a crowd of people and you see a little animal, maybe you can tell, okay, it's got 4 legs, it's an animal, but is it a cat? Is it a dog? Is it a rabbit? Is it something else? You can't really tell. And that's kind of the same thing with these admixtures where, continental wise, yeah, okay, it looks like a 4-legged animal. Okay, it looks like someone who's from Europe. Okay, well, it has a tail, so maybe it's a cat, maybe it's a dog, maybe it's a this, maybe it's a that. Oh, okay, well, it has this, so maybe it's Northwestern European. But then to say confidently, oh, that's definitely a dog, it's like, okay, that's definitely England. And then all of a sudden the picture comes into view and no, it wasn't a dog. It was actually a cheetah or, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of that same thing of like, the admixtures, they give you that blurry view and you can get kind of an idea. And like continentally, you can get a good idea of some things. If you see a thing in the sky and, oh yeah, I can pick that out. That looks like a bird. But what bird is it? Or, that looks like a person, or that looks like a tree, or that looks like a this, or, and it's the same thing. It looks like a French or a German or, whatever, however it may be. And so, it just gives you a blurry image at best. Sylvia, do you do family search? Yes, I do family search very similarly to the other ones I mentioned as a cousin bait sort of thing. I recently did, within the past year, I went on family search and did a big update to part of it because someone had gone in and changed stuff up really badly. I forgot exactly what it was, but I think they basically added a whole incorrect branch into a tree. Actually, I remember I figured it out because when Roots Tech was doing the Family Finder thing, someone messaged me and was like, oh, looks like I'm your cousin through this. Do you know anything about it? And then it was like, oh, looks like someone did some completely incorrect stuff and connected here, and that's not it. And so I went in and had to fix all of that. But yeah, it's not, family search is not one I update much. Family search is probably one of the trees that I suggest least to people. I love collaborative family trees like Genie and WikiTree and Family Search, but Family Search is by far one of the worst collaborative trees, most especially because they have the least tools and implementations in place to combat the downsides of a collaborative tree. So the downsides or for those who don't know, a collaborative family tree is where instead of everybody working on their own tree, you're trying to work on one family tree that connects to everybody. So as soon as you find a connection between your tree and the world family tree, you want to merge them together. And then you can work on almost anything else in the tree. But the issue is that you get a lot of people who go in and will put in incorrect information, or they'll get into edit wars because they think something's right and someone else thinks something's right. And you'll have all these other weird issues that'll come up. And with Genie, they have curators in place. They have master profiles. They have a lot of other stuff in place. With WikiTree, they have the honor code. They have a lot of like limitations on certain profiles that you can edit, like the trusted profile thing, and then like notable profiles and stuff. So both WikiTree and Genie have things in place to help combat the issues of a collaborative tree. But from my experience, Family Search has almost nothing. So I see the most edit warring on Family Search, most issues of people just not being able to get stuff corrected. And, maybe I'm wrong in some of this, and maybe there are things in place for family search, but my understanding is there's almost nothing, almost nothing in place. So, I don't know. But family search, it's the LDS Church website, and it is definitely the best site if you have LDS connections. When I did the family tree for Drew Durnill, that was by far the most that I had ever used family search than in any other research, because there was just so much, because it was an LDS family, and that's where the LDS do a lot of their research. Yeah, I agree, Shelley. The admixtures are a fun toy, but not much else. I think the ancestry is initially important for those who descend from slavery. We have no idea. I mean, yes and no. I think the ethnicity admixture, which is what I believe you mean by the ancestry, it is important for people that cannot trace their family trees back to a point to be able to figure things out. So for people who descend from ancestors who were enslaved, that is a very common aspect of it. Are they going to figure out where they came from in Africa? It's very doubtful. Very few African Americans have been able to figure that out. But I still think there are some other better methods that can give you some idea that clears things up. Why DNA testing, mitochondrial DNA testing. But at the same time, still understanding, even for those people where all they're going to have for certain aspects of their ancestry to try to get an estimation of it is the ethnicity admixture, well, it still is just a blurry image. And hopefully one day, with the improvements of digitization of records, and especially a lot of the projects going on right now, like the, I think it's, the Million Names Project. Let me pull that up. The 10 Million Names Project, which is being run by the NEHGS, African Ancestors, is a project that is geared towards trying to solve a lot of these issues. And hopefully one day we can get to a point where a lot of people who descend from ancestors that were enslaved in the Americas can find out where they came from in Africa. But yes, there are some people where it's just, you're just going to have the estimates to work with, but it doesn't negate the fact that there's still only a blurry image of what that ancestry is. Yu Chen, does MyHeritage and Ancestry test the same amount of DNA as 23andMe? I'd like to update the one with the most amount of testing to some webs. So we kind of mentioned this before, but each test is testing about 700,000 DNA markers. SNPs is what they're called, single nucleotide polymorphisms. So a single nucleotide, your A, C, T, and Gs. A polymorphism, basically a fancy word for a mutation where it changed from one letter to another, from an A to a T or whatever. And because of that, that correlates to a mutation that can be tracked in a sense. And so each site is testing a different number of SNPs. They're all testing largely the same amounts of SNPs, about 700,000, and largely overlap of the same SNPs. I don't know the specifics of who's testing more or less, and I don't know the specifics of who has the most unique SNPs. But we mentioned it before about how if you do test with multiple companies, you can go into GEDmatch and create what's known as a super kit, which will take all of the unique SNPs from each one of your tests from the different sites and then put them together into one large, unique super kit. So, yeah. F. Austin, do you see a time where admixture will be maybe not undeniable, but clearly reliable, not fuzzy and accurate to a higher degree, and what would bring that about? So I think that we will see the degree of confidence in admixtures increase over time, because a large part of it is just a matter of having the population groups to study. And the ones that are going to be the ones that are the most difficult to ever figure out are going to be the population groups where there's so much overlap of ancestry with other population groups that it's too difficult to decipher. So Northwestern Europeans are a great example, where you have so much population flow between the British Isles, areas of France and Germany and the lowlands, as well, or the Low Countries, excuse me, as well as the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Norway, Sweden. And basically, there was so much population flow that there's a lot of ancestral overlap from hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of overlapping. And so I don't, those types of areas, I think it'll be much more difficult to make it a clearer picture. But I think with a lot of other areas, we will see a lot of improvements. So it's largely going to be the areas that just haven't had enough testing. That's definitely a big part of it. But I think the degree of accuracy is a hard one to say. I know in a previous stream I had, I think it was Dane Edwards, who comments a lot on a lot of this stuff, hated me using that term because accuracy is within itself its own type of statistical analysis. But basically, will it be a much higher confidence in what it actually says? And I think we will see that. I don't know how much higher we'll see, because it seems to have plateaued in some ways in recent years, but you never know. Maybe there's something someone's going to find that's going to change how we are able to decipher some of this stuff to a higher degree. Astro Martin, I got 2 DNA tests, one on MyHeritage, one on Living DNA, and they showed different results. One showed Iberian and Ashkenazi blood. Blood's not a very good not a good term to use when we're talking about DNA tests, but okay. The other showed British blood, no Iberian or Ashkenazi. Which is it? Well, for one, you haven't mentioned any percentages. For two, you're talking about MyHeritage versus Living DNA, which Living DNA does not have any Jewish categories. So there's a lot going on here. I'm not going to get too in-depth into it because this is something rehashed on my channel a billion times over. But basically, you're looking at two very different, you're looking at two tests that, even though they're kind of testing for the same thing, their results are being defined very differently because they have a whole different system, a whole different algorithm, a whole different population groups that they're defining. So the fact that Living DNA does not even define Ashkenazi is a large part of it. But yeah, I won't get too into that. Shante Tarver, I think that the admixture is important initially if you come from a background of slavery in America. Okay, yeah, you mentioned you had the comment before, the same one. All right. Worded differently. All right. Yeah, Anna, I had the same issue with Family Search. I had a line all coming from England. However, I have Irish and Scottish, so I had to delete a lot. Yeah. Karma, I have a branch with a lot of siblings. One of those branches is historical, been sourced, and has some historical on it. People keep correcting it without looking at notes and sources. Sigh. Yeah, and that's a major issue. Like with Genie, we can lock down profiles, and I'm pretty sure WikiTree can also lock down profiles. So that's a major thing with a collaborative tree. If you have profiles that are celebrity profiles in a sense, or very historical, or just ones that there's a high possibility of random people who don't know what they're doing coming in and editing it because they think they know, that needs to be locked down. Yeah, Neek, for me, Family Search is very useful to find/trace family that emigrated from the Netherlands to the US, and it's free. Yeah, I mean, I think Genie is really great for Dutch trees. Granted, I'm, on the Dutch Jewish side of trees, but from my experience, I feel like Genie is very robust for the Dutch trees, but maybe Family Search is more robust. I don't know. I do know Family Search has a lot of the records on there, but, I don't know. Family Search is good for finding free documents like census records. Yeah, I mean, Family Search is a great place to get started. Family Search is a great place to find records. The Family Search Wiki is an amazing place to be able to figure out how to find what you're looking for. But when I say I don't like Family Search for the collaborative trees, it's really just that collaborative tree aspect. Family Search is definitely a site that I'm on all the time. I bring it up all the time in my streams where I do the actual research and all that too. So definitely not one that I'm knocking at all, just for their collaborative tree part. Not a fan. Brian, I like Family Search when I'm desperate. I'll look at other trees. Also, they have some great record collections for free. Yeah. I mean, same thing I said. And I used to Ancestry, 23andMe, and MyHeritage for DNA, but only use Ancestry and Family Search for trees. Interesting. Sylvia, can we expect the other DNA companies to do something like Ancestry's side view anytime soon? I don't know. It's a possibility. I was pretty surprised when the side view came out because, doing some sort of an auto phasing thing like that can be pretty difficult to do. And, I don't know how reliable they've been. I know I've heard from a good amount of people that they've been fairly reliable. In my experience, it's been kind of a mixed bag because, for one, it's not reliable at all for a lot of endogamous profiles, which is what I deal with largely. But then for the non-endogamous profiles that I've dealt with, it's felt like it's been 50-50, and the ones that seem to do it quite well, and the one versus the ones that it's like not that great. But then again, I'm also, I guess, for a lot of the ones that I am dealing with that are non-endogamous, it's basically like a lot of Northwestern European profiles where it's kind of like, I don't know, it maybe it's not the best profiles where side view is useful for. I wouldn't be surprised if other companies are going to try to do stuff like that. My guess is if any company were to roll something out like that, it's going to be MyHeritage, because I think MyHeritage, their big thing at this point that they've realized is they need to increase the database size and they need to improve the accuracy of the admixture. Those are the two things that Ancestry has over them. Otherwise, MyHeritage has a lot over Ancestry. The only other thing Ancestry has had over MyHeritage for a long time that MyHeritage recently improved was the collaborative aspect of being able to share your DNA profile so that people could look at your matches and actually do genealogy. But with MyHeritage, they recently rolled out the ability to manage profiles for other people too. So that's definitely a big thing. David Vargas, that is why I stopped as much in Family Search. People would change my well-researched info without any sort of collaboration, and the changes they made were just wrong. Yeah. And you'll find that on any of the collaborative trees, but they just don't have anything in place to combat it. True Serum 101, do you know if Iberian and North African ancestry are commonly mistaken for the other? Yeah, I mean, commonly mistaken wouldn't be the choice of words I would use for it, but yes, I would say Iberian and North African are the best way to put it is Iberian and North African have a large overlap of shared ancestry. And because of that, there is a lot of genetic commonality between the population group that most people would just define as Iberian and the population groups that people would define as North African. And so when they try to decipher what's North African and what's Iberian, there is going to be misreads that should be more Iberian that will be North African. But kind of like the Northwestern European admixture I just mentioned before, there's been so much historical population migration between Iberia and North Africa for thousands of years. I mean, considering all of the caliphates and empires and everything that's covered both of those areas, just considering how close they are through the Strait of Gibraltar, it is a very common connection. So this is something I think we see with a lot of the admixtures really is that the genetic commonality between certain population groups is so strong that we see misreads of one to the other. So another great example that a lot of people see is people who have Native American ancestry will often get small readings of Eastern Asian or even sometimes other Asian population groups because there is that strong correlation through the historical migration patterns of Asians coming over into the Americas and thus creating the Native American population. So it's kind of along those lines. I'm not going to go too much longer. I just realized I've been going for well over 2 hours on the stream. But I'm going to try to answer a couple more questions, but I think I'll be just a little bit more selective. So we'll see. All right, Nick, do you think there will be better or more powerful tools than the current DNA technology for genealogy? I don't know exactly if there's anything that will be, anything out of like left field that we can really expect, other than the lower SNP testing for artifact testing and degraded DNA. So basically stuff like Kintelligence, which I've been talking a lot about more and more. But Kintelligence is a test that tests only 10,200 or 10,230 SNPs, as opposed to the other autosomal microarrays, which typically test 700,000 SNPs. So just over 1% of the same number of SNPs, which thus allows you to get viable profiles out of less DNA and DNA that's more highly degraded. So that's probably going to be the biggest thing that I can predict is something we'll see once it hits the consumer market. That's when we'll see artifact testing go improve greatly. But otherwise, I don't really know. I think what we'll see is more tools in manipulation of segment data and painting and that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's something that somebody's going to come out with where nobody was expecting it, that it's going to, some random thing about, well, when we look into the data even more further, we can determine by some random protein, this and that, or, I don't know, I don't know. Shante, do you think that we have access to all the tools that are used on those TV shows like the segment matching? So yeah, it just depends on what website you test with. So if you test with Ancestry DNA, they do not have a chromosome browser. So you are not going to be able to do segment DNA or DNA painting or anything like that if you test on Ancestry. But if you test on Ancestry, you can upload it to websites that allow you to do segment DNA. So for one, GEDmatch is a website that allows segment DNA testing. So GEDmatch, very commonly used website. So you can do one-to-one matching on GEDmatch, and it gives you the most advanced segment data, because not only does it tell you if you're matching, it also tells you are you matching at a half identical or full identical amount. So basically considering, you're getting pairs of chromosomes, pairs of DNA, one from mom, one from dad. Well, in some places you might be sharing DNA on both sides, so yeah, I won't get too into that, but so yes, the segment matching that you see on the TV shows, like whenever you watch Finding Your Roots and you see CC Moore on there talking about the segment data and all of that, that is something you can do. No matter what DNA test you take, it's just a matter of what sites offer it. So like I said, Ancestry DNA does not have chromosome browser, so you'll have to download your raw DNA from Ancestry and upload it to GEDmatch or MyHeritage or Family Tree DNA. But if you've tested it, Family Tree DNA or MyHeritage or one of the ones that has the chromosome browser available, you can do that chromosome browsing and DNA painting. So those tools are definitely there, all available to you. GEDmatch has the most robust genetic genealogy tools out of any site, but they are not a site you can test with. Of the sites you can test with, my opinion is that MyHeritage has the best genetic genealogy tools, such as the chromosome browser, which allows you to do segment matching. DNA or MyHeritage not only does that, they have the advanced shared matching view that MyHeritage has. So like MyHeritage has this where it's showing, here's you, here's your match Wendy, and here's your shared match with Wendy Diane. Well, here's how you match Diane, and here's how Wendy matches Diane. And here's how you and Wendy match Ruby. Well, MyHeritage has had this for a long, long time, but even more, MyHeritage also has a thing over on the right side that'll tell you, do you, Wendy, and Diane all have a triangulated segment? And if you have a triangulated segment, you can click on the button on MyHeritage and it'll even take you to the chromosome browser and show you where those triangulated segments are. So yes, these are all available to you. If you go onto my channel, I have a bunch of videos going into it, talking about how to use these tools and all that stuff too. Also, Family History Fanatics is a great channel to look into that stuff. I don't know if I'd call them defunct, but they've been inactive as a YouTube channel for a minute. My mom hates when I say that, a minute, but they've been inactive for a while, but very good stuff in terms of how to use DNA painting and chromosome browsers and things like that. Brian, good night. I'm heading over to my own stream now. Thanks, Jarrett. Always love learning DNA info from you, how we got here, genealogy. Well, Brian, thank you very much for being in the stream. I will be ending the stream in a minute or so. So for anyone who wants to keep doing genealogy stuff, head on over to Brian's channel, How We Got Here Genealogy, and check out his live stream. He specializes in Canadian and Scottish ancestry. So very fun channel. Daniel, which software is the best to build trees? My opinion is Genie is the best software to build trees in terms of manipulating the tree. In terms of building the trees with ease using documentation, I would say it's Ancestry. And that's why I kind of use a combination of both. But my preference overall, I guess I'd probably say Ancestry would be the #1 recommendation. Eric, should I go to RootsTech 2025? Well, if you go, you'd be able to meet me. So that's one big positive. But I would suggest it. I mean, I know I see you in the chats all the time. I see you very active in the chat all the time. So I know you're very into this stuff. And I feel like people like yourself who are very into the genealogy and especially very into the community aspect of it, you'll love it. It's Comic-Con for genealogists. There's an expo hall with lots of fun stuff, all the newest tools. You literally every year I go to RootsTech, I'm always learning about stuff. And, I'm supposed to be one of the people that's on the edge of all of the, the newest stuff. Go to RootsTech and you can be on the edge too of a lot of this stuff. And then, yeah, I mean, it's worth checking out. I think it's worth checking out. Okay, let's see. Kind of jump. Yeah, I see a lot of people answering the software question. Yeah, if you're talking computer software, the #2 or the two ones that I always refer to are Family Tree Maker and Roots Magic. Granted, I have not used either of those for years. Basically, I haven't used the offline software for a long, long time because I'm much more about the collaborative aspect of genealogy. So I just like having it straight on a Genie or Ancestry or stuff like that, So yeah. F. Austin, maybe this has already been asked. Apologies if it has. In general, what is the state of epigenomic testing? Is that something that exists or you work towards? So I have not dealt a lot with epigenetics. Funny enough, a cousin of mine who I spoke about or a cousin of mine who I met recently and I've spoken about in my videos is someone who studied epigenetics. And he and I had a very interesting conversation when we hung out in Amsterdam about that, because we were talking about a lot of similarities in our family about different things in terms of like diseases, as well as like there was a commonality on my one side that were basically a lot of for lack of a better term, colorful drivers. we don't like to put up with bad drivers is a way to put it. We're not road ragers or anything, but we are very much the this idiot sort of thing. And that was, it was kind of that, just kind of talking about that stuff, but also like, that side of the family, everyone's super artistic. We have tons of musicians and painters and sculptors and potters and just like people that make and are creative and all that stuff. And so we talked about the whole thing of epigenetics, which I guess I should probably say for people who don't know what epigenetics means. Basically, it's kind of like it's not phenotyping necessarily, where phenotyping is like how you look and how the DNA presents itself, but the factors of like what can cause certain things in like certain traits to be inherited within a family due to outside factors. So yeah, it's not something I know much about. Very minimal. Oh wait, I just realized the thing I pulled up, I didn't put in. There we go. I was clicking through all this stuff, talking about it, and you all must have been like, what is he doing? So with epigenetics, very, very different than genealogy stuff. But I guess it is a kind of an interesting thing to think about in terms of, could epigenetics be something that is used genealogically at some point? I don't know. So very interesting. So I think with that, I think I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream. A little bit of a long one today, almost 2.5 hours. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining today. Ton of great questions, tons of great stuff to talk about. I really kind of came into this stream today just thinking, I don't know what I want to talk about. I don't feel like doing a build a tree stream, because as much as I like those, they kind of all dive into the same sort of stuff. I was about to say delve. I'm working too much with AI. They all delve into too much of the same, records and all, how to do all that stuff. But yeah, so thank you everyone for joining. Next week we'll be on the reaction channel. Hopefully have my Max Miller video coming out soon. Still a few things to go through with that in terms of steps to get it all done. But definitely be sure to join next week for the question and answer reaction stream. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful Friday. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining. I